What's up, everybody? We are here with candidate Eric Strong for LA County, Chief Strong. We're thankful for his time. He is running here in Los Angeles, so this is an important conversation, and we're excited to hear from him. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Are you able to hear me? Uh-oh, you froze.
Sorry about did we lose connection there?
Yeah, you
Hello?
froze just for a little bit.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so we are here live with candidate Eric Strong for LA County Sheriff. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We got a bunch of questions in. People were excited to hear from you, so thank you for taking the time. We do want to play your promo that you just shared, and then we're going to dive in.
All right, let's do
And
it.
if anyone has questions, drop them in the chat. We're monitoring all social platforms, so drop them in the chat. And thank you for tuning in. Here we are.
My name is
So there you heard it from his Instagram account. I would encourage people to check it out. If you want, what's your Instagram account?
Strong for Sheriff. Strong, the number 4 Sheriff.
Okay, Strong for Sheriff. So check him out, and we're gonna dive in. If we could start by going into your past experience, your employment history, and really how you got to become a chief, and of what department, and where we're at today.
All right. Well, I started my career in the early 90s with Compton Police Department. While there, it was during a very challenging era. I worked patrol. I was a field training officer. I was on a task force. I was on a SWAT team. I was a gang officer, gang investigator. Flew around in the helicopter several times. Just really got a lot of on the ground experience. For a short period of time, I went to Pasadena Police Department, a little less than a year. Came back, and then I got absorbed into the Sheriff's Department in 2000. Compton Police Department was absorbed in. While at the Sheriff's Department, worked for youth programs, worked internal affairs, worked patrol, as a sergeant, worked patrol as a lieutenant, worked custody, worked courts, unit commander of our Audit and Accountability Bureau, unit commander of our Advocacy Bureau, unit commander at a patrol station. And then the last probably year and a half, maybe a little bit more of my career, I was at LA County Probation as a chief of campus safety and security operations. And then I retired in March of 2025. That's the thumbnail post-it note version of my career.
And in that experience, were some of the defining moments or now shout out to Pasadena Police Department former officer Tyson Crutchfield, who was with that department and trying to de-escalate certain situations, and I found to be retaliated against. But what were certain experiences that you had that make you say, I want to run for this position and I can make change?
I had a lot of very impactful paradigm shift kind of epiphany experiences, starting back very, very early within my career. And I don't know that I realized the impact of them back then when they were happening, but it's something that I can draw upon now. And we can dig into those a little bit. But what I really want to tell you is the reason that I'm running is because where the department is, it doesn't have to be. I actually ran in 2022 for this position, came in third out of 9 candidates, actually represented very well, although I was outranked and outspent by just about everybody else. And at that time, we had a very divisive, toxic, disruptive sheriff that was in office. And, it was creating a lot of attention. There was a lot going on, with law enforcement after George Floyd, several bad shootings, COVID, and Villanueva was stirring up a lot of mess himself. So after the primary, after doing very well, I supported the current sheriff, Luna. And I believed, and I didn't support him just automatically. I sat with him. We had long conversations, and I had hoped that he was going to do some of the things that he promised he was going to do. But what I saw over the next 4 years was no real change. He kind of kept the same administration in there that Alex had. For the most part, he promoted and left everybody in place. Where Alex was just refusing to comply with subpoenas of the Civilian Oversight Commission. Luna used county council to sue, or he used the courts to sue the Civilian Oversight Commission to not comply with the subpoenas. Our jail conditions got worse. We are still having the same complaints. Deputy gangs was never really addressed. Just a lot of things that never changed. What he did was he quieted the noise. He played nice in the sandbox. He shook hands with people. He made friends. But he didn't do anything to make those changes that were so important and so needed within the department. That's why I'm running again, to get to those changes that needed to be made for a very long time.
And what would you say though to someone who says you're making some bold claims and we're going to go over them, right? And you have a ambitious mission that I respect and I think I align with in a lot of ways. But what would keep, you get into the position and then, I think what politicians do is they typically say we're limited in what we can do. To touch on something specific, right? Like Men's Central Jail, it's been talked as a murder ground. It's been published in media across the nation and beyond of being dangerous, of being inhumane, of being unconstitutional, the conditions being beyond anything anyone would ever even expect of someone who's convicted of a crime. What are your thoughts on that? What is your plan? And really beyond just the plan, like how do you actually execute it so that it's not just some really good talk during this time, but it can actually be done. And we're not disappointed like you were with maybe some of like Luna, right?
Right. So, I've worked in Men's Central Jail, and not that it's ever really a nice place to be. I would never want to be there, on the inside. But I've been there when it's been almost spotless, when it's been clean, much cleaner than what it is right now. The Everything that we're talking about, let's just talk about the inhumane conditions and the spoiled, moldy food that's being served, right? Spoiled, moldy food does not have anything to do with the four walls, the ceiling, or the floor. It's not an old building issue. It is an issue of people not caring enough to get the food hot to the inmates. In other words, it's a personnel issue, and a personnel issue is a leadership issue, right? This has just started happening over the course of a few years, and when I say that Luna was actually given, literally, no pun intended, but absolutely funny, the absolute recipe on how to handle, if nothing else, the food component. And I know that because my wife was a unit commander of food services. She made a lot of changes. She made a lot of positive changes in there just so that things like this didn't happen, right? And because of the vindictive nature of Villanueva, he undid everything, going after her when I ran against him. Well, Luna knew all of that. He was given the information, he was given, and he never really changed anything. So what we're really talking about, I know that there's this inhumane conditions, there's violence in there. We're having, look, how many deaths have we had in this year already? These are all issues of failed leadership. People want to talk about policy, but policy doesn't dictate behavior. If that's the case, we would never need internal affairs, right? Because if policy dictated behavior, then everybody would just follow the policy. What we're talking about is failure to hold people accountable. What we're talking about is failure for leadership to get in there, understand what's going on, know where the deficiencies are, correct them, and then hold accountability to the deputies that are working those floors, the sergeants and the lieutenants that are in there, to make sure that things are running efficiently, things are running smoothly. And I'm not trying to make light of this. I'm really not, but it's like any other industry, any other corporation. Efficiency, protocols, processes, accountability, are the things that make things go smoothly and make them work. So what I'm talking about is I have family members that have spent a lot of time in Men's Central Jail, in the jail system, per se. I have family members that have suffered from substance abuse and mental health conditions. So the reality of it is, I can tell you, is that I care. I want everybody to be served and treated with dignity and respect. And that's really what we need is we need a leader that is going to care about everybody that they serve, the community that we serve, whether they're inside or outside. And I heard you say something about politicians, and I don't want to be seen as a politician. I know that I have to run for this office. I've never run for any other office. I won't run for any other office. I don't want to be in politics, but unfortunately, in order to get into the position to make the changes that need to be made here, I have to campaign. I have to become an elected sheriff, which is what I am working to do. But I'm not trying to be in this politician, this politricks world is what I call it.
I hear that. And so for Men's Central Jail, the idea is make it more humane and livable. You're not suggesting it to be closed and something else.
Oh, yes, I'm all for closing it. Yeah. You know
You
what I
are
mean?
for closing it.
Yeah, yeah. And when I ran last time, I was the only one that supported closing. And I think there's a post on that. I was the only one that supported closing Men's Central Jail. I think it is an outdated building. It is old, right? It needs to be changed. It is not conducive to stabilization. It's not even really honestly conducive to safety. But in the meantime, until we get it closed, there is absolutely no reason that the conditions in there need to be as horrid, horrendous, and inhumane as they are. That is what I'm talking about is failed leadership.
And if it were closed and that's what's going to happen, what would you recommend, or where would these 4,000 boys build place, or is the idea, what is it?
That is something that there's a whole commission that's working on what to do at Men's Central Jail. And here's my thought. Right now we have Twin Towers, that is the largest mental health hospital in the country, which is a problem. I mean, when we think about the largest mental health hospital being in a jail, there's a problem there. I mean, and with the sheriff's department being the largest jail system in the country, it kind of makes sense. So what we're doing is we're incarcerating people that need help. We're incarcerating people that are suffering from addiction and suffering from mental health. And many times, I won't even say many times, for the most part, all that we have right now in the sheriff's department is a system that is based on an incarceral process and a penal process, that when we see people in crisis, how do we respond? We respond with a badge. We respond with a deputy sheriff. And where do we take them? We take them to a hospital, and then we take them to jail, because here's what we have. You have a person that's take the busiest intersection, wherever it is, that's naked in the busiest intersection playing dodgeball with cars. When deputies show up, what do they have? They have a penal code that says, well, he's naked. That's indecent exposure. He's obstructing traffic. That's a violation. Heaven forbid he has a stick, a golf club, anything. He's hitting cars. Well, that becomes a vandalism. And then deputies get there and they try to give him commands. He fails, he doesn't refuse. He fails to comply. And then there's a use of force. Then they end up charging him with assault on a police officer. So now what we have is we have a person that was in crisis that needed help that's in our jail. So that's the things that we need to look at and adjust how we're responding to those. And we need to get those people into crisis centers, not in the jail. So it's a long way of saying what we have to do is we have to stop feeding people that don't need to go to jail into the jails. And then we have to start the decarceration process of taking the people out that shouldn't have been there in the first place and getting them the help that they need. It's not an overnight fix. It's not a flip of a switch, but I have an outcome-based diversion plan, a pilot program that we're going to be able to launch very quickly after getting into office. And we're going to start working towards those processes and those steps almost immediately.
Okay. And there is a board of supervisors, right? That's where Care First
Yes.
goal for Men's Central. And you would be in charge of, as the chief, as the sheriff, to recommend those people. Is that correct?
When you say the people, which people do you mean? I lost you.
The people
people
who
that
would
we
be
need to
part
start
of the board of supervisors regarding Care First of Men's Central Jail.
Yes, I do support Care First. Absolutely. And part of it, I don't know, when you say I would be in charge of it, it would be a collaboration, a partnership with Department of Mental Health, Medical Services Bureau, as well as the Sheriff's Department, in terms of how we start moving people out, if I understand the question correctly.
Okay, no, I hear you. We have someone in the chat that goes by Sin18, and if I'm not mistaken, that is it is the family member of Francisco Nunez, if you're familiar with who that is. He was, let me hear. I don't want to get anything wrong, but he was in their caption. It says, he was kidnapped and murdered by LASD Lancaster, and they fight for justice. There's a lot of families who are victim of police shootings, police deaths. I mean, police beatings, police. They don't even know what happened. It's just their loved ones gone forever. The comment here says, how can impacted families like mine trust you to hold deputies accountable when past sheriffs such as Luna failed to do so? And there's a handful of families that are in the comments that we have advocated for. I mean, Dijon Kizzy, if you're familiar, right? He was riding his bicycle, and the result is he's killed. I was one of the people out there documenting protests just days after, and found myself in the Inglewood jail, arrested by the sheriffs. Nothing. I was never charged with a crime. Like whatever they arrested me for, it was all dismissed, and I had to sue. But this, they assassinate people. They then assassinate the character, and they then retaliate against the family members, the journalists, the community, the neighbors. What could you say to that and those family members and victims?
The first thing I could do is apologize and give my condolences for your loss, especially as a representative of law enforcement. Listen, I lost a cousin to law enforcement. I mean, my cousin was killed by Hawthorne PD. So I understand. I see the impact that has on a family. The other thing I can do is tell you, when I ran last time, and I wish I had a chance to do it this time, I met with impacted families and I heard them out, and I understand, what their concerns are. And one of the things I can tell you is that you will have a seat at the table with me where we can just talk about these things, and we could start looking at how the fixes are. What it really comes down to is accountability. And when I talk about, when you talk about how will you, how can you trust me to hold the deputies accountable? During my career, I've worked internal affairs. I investigated deputy gangs. I did some of these investigations, and also as the unit commander of Advocacy Bureau. Advocacy Bureau is the backside of the investigations and all of the employment law stuff, where we get all of the investigations, the force, the shooting, the misconduct, and then we make those recommendations to the leadership. And what I want people to know is that everybody asks, can internal affairs, can the police police the police? I want you to know it's not internal affairs. It's not the investigation. It's the decision maker. Internal affairs puts together a book of facts, of interviews, of information, of photos, of evidence, whatever you want to call it, and they present it to a chief or a panel of chiefs or some assistant sheriffs, and then they're the decision makers. That is where the failure lies within the system. It's the people that are determining whether these incidents are within policy or out of policy. The people that are determining if there's a level of discipline that's needed or not needed, or whether or not, there's training or anything like that. So the reality of it is it's going to come back down to the leadership. But I want to go back to this. So I met with these impacted families, and we were coming out of COVID, so it was on a Zoom. And I want to say there was probably about 25 to maybe 30 people on there. And we had one of the most respectful but yet sincere conversations. And I don't remember who it was, but I remember one of the women, I think it was her husband that had been killed, said, I want you to notice something. I want you to notice that we sat here and we had a respectful conversation with you. And what she told me is this: we know that there's nothing that you can say that's going to bring our loved one back, but we want to be heard. And we want our pain and our opinions to matter. And when we're not heard, that's when we take to the streets. And I will tell you this, that number one, you will be heard. Number two, I understand the double victimization, if not sometimes triple victimization of the families. And here's what that looks like. There's a death within our control. That happens, based on the LASD. And then what do? And this is something that really bothers me, and we will make a change for that. We then go and we do these things, and we serve these search warrants on the family's house. And we go in there and we tear up their house, and we treat them like they're criminals as well. That will not happen under my administration. That will not happen. I am not going to sit up here and promise you that another use of force will never occur. I will not promise you that another death at the hands of law enforcement or the sheriff's department will not occur. But what I will promise you and what I will tell you is that we will do things that will work towards de-escalation, non-escalation. Non-escalation is a word. I will tell you this, Senate. I told you I started my career in Compton in the early '90s, a very challenging era. I have been involved in officer-involved shootings myself. I have never been involved in an officer-involved shooting where somebody didn't have a gun and was actually shooting at me. So when I hear these state of mind shootings, these unarmed shootings, these shootings where I thought somebody had a gun, it does not sit well with me as an administrator, as a leader, as a police officer. If there is to be force, it has to be absolutely necessary, not just because we can. And that is the standard set by the department. That is the standard set by the leadership. I was thinking about it earlier today, having a conversation with somebody. And the way that typically happens right now, if there's a deputy involved shooting, right? Homicide gets involved, they conduct the investigation. And what happens is the department sits on it until the DA's office makes a determination. And I don't know if you know what this looks like, unless it gets a whole lot of attention and is forced for the department to make a decision, they will sit on it to see what the district attorney says. And as soon as the district attorney comes back and says, we're not going to file charges, guess what that determination? Okay, well, it's in policy. They didn't file charges, so, you know what I mean? We're going to handle it as a training issue. We're not going to do that. Policy and the law are two different things. There's no reason to sit on a deputy involved shooting or a use of force for a year and a half, 2 years to wait to see what the DA's office is going to do. Our policy is sometimes guided by the law, but it is not the law. So you're going to see a lot of changes. You're going to see things happening a lot quicker. You're going to see a whole different decision-making process. And that really just comes from being able to have the insight, knowing how these things work, knowing policy, knowing the law, and like I said, caring about how these things are disposed. We call it a disposition, right? And we cannot keep saying it's in policy. We cannot keep saying it's a training issue. As long as we keep saying that, we're basically saying it's okay to go out and do it again. Or we're telling the next deputy, go ahead and do it again and we'll take care of you. And I'm gonna tell you, the inside the sheriff's department, there is a very, very long tradition of what I call writing it right. We're gonna WRITE it until we can make it RIGHT. And we just keep writing and we keep writing and we keep writing. And eventually it comes out where it looks like it's justified. That will not be under my administration.
But I think key part sounds good. I have to say, I love everything you're saying. But officers, and it's in our country, this is right. There's a whole host of harm and violence and weaponry you can use, right, in the name of officer safety, with the idea that your safety or the community safety is in harm. And that's the justification to go into the house after they've executed someone, because God forbid there's a gun there that they can find or whatever it might be, to help start kind of justifying the reason they even initially went in. Look, it couldn't hurt if the sheriff is.
You dropped off.
Sorry about that. I'm give me.
Yeah, you're pretty choppy. Yeah, hello? I can hear you. It's going in and out, but I'm picking up most of what you're saying.
Okay. Well, what I was getting at is officers in the field, I find, have the ability under the name of officer safety to do whatever force that ultimately they desire, whether they should or not, right? Whether it's in the training or not. And what I was saying is I like what you say, and I think that a chief with the sentiment of what you're saying, having it would have a ripple effect and an impact. But I do find it troubling that they wouldn't be going into these homes after killing someone's loved one, or using excessive force in these instances because of the overall, because of the bigger issues that I'm not sure a chief could fix. Or do you disagree? Like, can the chief actually fix the biggest issues? And I want to kind of go into the deputy gangs and these kind of monumental problems with that position.
So I want to say this. The question is, can a chief fix it? Can a sheriff fix it? Um, I do think that the leadership has a significant impact on it. Will it be fixed once and for all and forever? And like I said, it never happens again. I am not going to sit up here and say that. So no, the fix isn't in there. It's not like, you know what I mean, we're taking a transmission and replacing it and saying it's fixed. There are still going to be problems within law enforcement as long as we're dealing with people, which is what we're dealing with. The employees are people. They're fallible. They have biases. But can it be impacted? Absolutely. And I think the question is, do we want somebody that understands it and wants to impact it and start changing it for the better? Or do we want somebody that doesn't really care about impacting and it just keeps things going in the direction that they're going? Yes, it can be impacted. And it's impacted by accountability. It's impacted by the messaging, by the expectations that are set forth. Listen, there's a saying, what do deputies do? They do what they're allowed to do. And if I have a deputy that's doing something wrong, and my main goal is to make sure that I have as few or the least amount of sustained complaints, or I don't want uses of force to be found out of policy. Let's just say this. We get 100 complaints. How many do you think the department wants to be sustained? 0. They don't want any sustained complaints, because if we have sustained complaints, then what are we saying? We're not doing something right. We're not properly training our people. We're not properly holding our people accountable. We haven't properly taught them what to do. So the goal is to have as few sustained complaints as possible, especially at a station for a captain level, right? Because then what do you look at? You look at the captain and say, hey, out of 100 complaints, 50 of them are valid. 50 of them are sustained. Hey, captain, what are you doing? Why aren't your deputy? Because we can go to another station and out of 100 complaints, maybe 5 of them are sustained. So in other words, we have to have people in place that care more about making it right than they do the statistics. And once we start doing that, then we start having the true accountability. Listen, in the leadership roles that I've had a lot of complaints, a lot of use of force. I've never seen any of them have an impact when all we do is keep writing them right and we keep pushing them through. The only time I've seen them have an impact when I call that deputy in and I sit them down and I said, listen, here's what the people said. You can't do this. You better not treat people like this. You better not talk to people like this. Or when I call them and I say, hey, listen, you violated the policy. This is going to be administrative investigation. And now you're subject to some discipline, right? So until we act, as long as we just keep passing it by, and I can go on and give you stories about the lieutenants and the sergeants that have submitted stuff to me that I've kicked back and said, oh, absolutely not. That's the problem. The problem is the accountability, right? Deputies are going to do what they're allowed to do. And if we don't address wrong behavior, we're basically telling them it's okay to continue the wrong behavior. That is really what it comes down to. I mean, and I hate to say it, I hate to keep beating this same horse. Policy is not going to fix that. Think about it. If laws dictated behavior, we would never need law enforcement, because nobody would ever violate the law because it says it on the books. Same thing with policy. Policy is not what's needed. It's the accountability.
If officers, and let me ask, this is a tad on the side, but I think related. In sheriff's issues would get resolved. Right?
You broke up.
You need to get insurance to be an officer. The insurance is going to look into your personnel file. They're going to look at any complaints. They're going to see if there's sustained ones. They're going to see if you've had shootings. And then they're going to make a financial decision based on your history. Do you think something like that could be of a benefit?
Absolutely, absolutely. I just consulted with the charter reform or charter reform. It was the LAPD Charter Reform Commission, and there's a gentleman out there who has been proposing this for a very long time, and it's basically misconduct insurance, right? And the way it's set up is that it's going to cover the first $1 million of any type of payout. And so that's going to do a couple of things. Number one is it's going to make the officers pay for it, or the deputies pay for it themselves. Number two, it's going to take that $1 million off the table for the taxpayers, right? So at least the first million, which a lot of them settle for less than, is going to take that off the table. But number three is, as you said, let's say you get it and it's 30, 40, $50 a month when you first start. You start getting complaints. They start having a payout. You start becoming high risk. That's going to go up. And let's just say that you do have a couple of payouts, and now it's going to start hitting that officer's pocket, right? They have some skin in the game now. And then eventually, if you get to a point where, hey, the insurance says, hey, we're dropping you, and maybe they got to go get reinsured somewhere else, and they got to pay this high premium. I think that's what what we're actually moving towards, and it is something that I would really look into deeply. And let me back up. I have looked into deeply, and it is something that I would really like to consider. It would be a big fight, be quite honest with the unions, but I think it's something we could start requiring new employees, you know what I mean, to start bringing on, and figuring out a way that we tier it into the employees that already exist. But it's a very good idea, and I think that we need to really look at that. Like you said, lawyers, doctors, everybody else has it. Why doesn't law enforcement?
Exactly. And I think it's like, in my opinion, the only profession where you do something, cause a ton of harm, and you kind of, hello.
I can hear you.
I was saying it's the only profession where you can do something, cause a ton of harm, and walk away and enjoy your life like it never happened, while you cause the most severe pain, injury, suffering to a person, or death, or family, right?
Right.
I want to quickly, if you can, talk about deputy gangs and how you would attack it. We do have a mother of someone who was severely abused by Ashton, if that's okay. But until we bring her on, if you could just quickly talk about deputy gangs.
Yeah, so I investigated deputy gangs when I was at Internal Affairs. I'm one of the only people that's really acknowledged the problem they have. Let me start off with this too. See, I didn't come up in the sheriff's department. All right. I didn't come up in, and when you look at deputy gangs, you don't see it everywhere else. So I was never indoctrinated, but do deputy gangs, and everybody wants to give a different term to it, a gang, a subculture, a clique, whatever you want to call it. Do they exist? Yes, they do. And have they caused harm? Yes. And have they caused the department harm? Yes. The reality of it is that their loyalty to their group is more important than their loyalty to ethics, treating people right, and the department. That is a problem, right? And it's been going on too long. Why has it been going on too long? Because guess what? Because of cronyism, and the fact that we don't have a merit-based system for promotion into the executive ranks means that those very same people move into the executive ranks, and then they're sympathetic or supportive in a lot of ways of this type of behavior. And again, I keep saying it, it goes back to the leadership. So what we have to do is we have to hold a very, very high standard. We have to say, hey, we're not going to have this. We have to start setting that baseline of zero tolerance. We have to start at the hiring process, even before they're hired. We have to start acknowledging them, and in that offer of employment, saying, if you join this clique, you are going to waive your employment rights, you are going to waive your civil service protections, and you will get fired if we find out. We also have to go back and really look and fight for those people who have already been out there and caused harm. And what that's going to call for us to do is we're going to have to go back and we're going to have to engage county council. We're going to have to say, we got to stop pressing the easy button. We're going to have to go back and say, we're going to fight civil service, and really just find ways to hold these individuals accountable. And that's going to be a process. That's going to take some time, but it's going to start with the leadership saying, absolutely no more. It stops now. If we find out about it, you're fired. And then we got to deal with it from there.
From your personal experience, do you know for certain, again, from your personal experience, that deputy gangs exist
Yes.
and you've
Again,
had
I did one
interactions?
of the largest investigations on the department that dealt with a deputy gang issue. So absolutely. And when you say deputy gangs, here's what I'm saying. You have a group of people that exclude, isolate other deputies, a group of people that create areas within the community that they serve, right? Where they are the ones that are acting like the gang members. You have a group of people who assault even other deputies. You know what I mean? So let's take it. Let's take it. We have the community, obviously, that's our biggest concern, right? But I say this for all the deputies who say, oh, there's no deputy gangs. Oh, they're not doing anything to harm the community. Oh, okay. Well, what about when they jump on and beat up their own people, when the people that are in the uniform just like you? Then they kind of say, well, that's when they kind of start, they don't want to talk about it then anymore. They want to move the finish line. But yes, you have people that are identified with a tattoo. You have people that have to do certain things to get that tattoo. You have this tattoo, or the holders of this tattoo, that say certain people, women, blacks, Asians, whatever it is, can't be in part of this. So absolutely, what are we saying? It's again, however you want to call it, it's wrong, it's bad, it's not meant to be in law enforcement. They shouldn't have a badge and a gun. That's my stance, and I'll stand by it.
Okay. We're going to bring Vanessa on in just a second. There was some recent laws and news regarding pretextual stops, right? Your thoughts on that? I'm assuming, based on this convo, you would be totally for not having these kind of stops for really meaningless.
Yeah, listen, these laws were originally set in place, and these decisions were originally set in place to help law enforcement, right, combat things like drugs and crime. However, what happened is they got involved. I'm sorry, they got into it and they took advantage of it, and they started using it, and they started just basically exploiting it, and they only exploited it in the Black and brown communities, right? So they have been the ones that have given up they've lost the tool. As I say, if you abuse it, you lose it. They took it to an extreme, and unfortunately, we can't have it anymore. And the reality of it is this: um, it's a discriminatory practice. That's what we've proven. That's what's been shown. So, yeah, I'm with it.
All right, we're going to bring on Miss Perez here. Hello, Miss Perez. Can you hear us?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I wanted to give you a few minutes if you want to speak on who you are, what's happened, and your question for. And forgive me, is it okay if we share the photo
That's fine.
of your son? Okay, I apologize. I wanted to ask you. Okay, if you may share, please, and
Um,
thank you.
yeah, thank you for allowing me to come up on here, inviting me on. Um, what I do want to say, Mr. Eric Strong, you've answered a lot of our questions. You've it sounds good. What you're saying sounds really good. I just want to know why you and not Luna? What's it? Yeah,
Yeah.
why you and not Luna? I can honestly say, every conversation that I've had with Luna, I feel it's been genuine when it comes to my family. Um, and he always says it's the law why he couldn't proceed with terminating the deputies. And it kind of seems like you're saying something different. And I just want to know why you and not Luna.
Well, I'll tell you why. First of all, many of the things that Luna has run on, I think we just really have to look at his track record, and let's just talk about transparency. He ran on transparency, right? He ran on cooperating with the Civilian Oversight Commission and cooperating with the Office of Inspector General. And then when you look at him actually, and it's in the newspaper, you can research it, him suing after AB 847, a legislation was put in place that gave the Civilian Oversight Commission the ability to receive confidential investigations he sued to not do that. So we have a law, and now he's trying to sue to say, well, I don't really know if I can comply or should comply with that law. That is not the sheriff's job, right? The sheriff's job is to comply with the law. So he ran on transparency, but he's not doing it. So honestly, if you ask me, he's the exact same as Villanueva. He's just going about it a different way. Villanueva was brash and loud and said, I'm not going to comply and there's nothing you can do. Luna's just doing it in a quieter way. I think when we look at the deputy gang issue, he's got in there and he's waffled back and forth, right? Well, yeah, they're kind of here, but they're really not here. They're really not that big of a problem. But you know what I mean? They're a problem. I want to address them. Well, I created a policy, but well, yes, no, right? And we look at what he's promoted people within the ranks with these tattoos. And guess what? Guess what he just received? He just received the endorsement of ALADS, the very union, right? It's the deputy union. He received their endorsement. So we kind of see why he's waffling back and forth. It really makes sense. I pledged in the last campaign, as well as in this one, not to take any money or endorsement from police unions. The inhumane conditions in the jail. Attorney General filed this lawsuit in September of 2025. That's just, well, coming up on 8-9 months ago now, well into his administration. He's trying to say, oh, well, this is from before. No, it's not. It's gotten worse. If it was getting better than the previous administration, why would the Attorney General then come and now say, well, you know what? It's getting better. I see a lot of improvements, but we're going to go ahead and sue you anyway. Same thing at the women's jail, sexual abuses, 600 complaints not substantiated. Not one of them substantiated. And this goes back to the leadership issue that I'm talking about. 600 complaints over 3 years during his administration, not one of them substantiated. Remember what I said, it's the decision makers that are deciding whether whether it's out of policy or not in policy, or whether to move it forward to a criminal investigation. It's not actually the complaint itself. I can go on and on and on about many of his failures. Failure to engage the community. I talk to people all the time. They say, hey, he wanted our vote. We haven't seen him since. Let's looking at the hiring crisis that we're having. We're spending $500 million in overtime. Now, whether you want to increase the department, improve the department, the reality of it is that people are leaving, and they're leaving voids, they're leaving vacancies. They don't want to be there. They're going to other agencies. We've had the most amount of suicides within employees under his administration than ever before. We've had the most amount of fatal incidents, whether they be traffic collisions from being fatigued. We had a bomb explosion. We had there's just failure after failure after failure that's going on. And then we look at the deaths in the jails. And I think one of the things that really bothers me, Ms. Perez, is the misinformation. The misinformation that he's putting out to the public is what really bothers me. We look at the deaths in the jail and allow Luna to talk about it. He says, well, there's an aging population and they're frail and they're sickly already. If you go to the April 9th Civilian Oversight Commission, you have the UCLA Public Policy Institute, as well as the Civil Brand Commission, that will tell you it's not an aging population. The average population across natural deaths, the average age across natural deaths is 55 years old. They're not old, they're not frail. That's much younger than what's going on outside of the jail. And the average age of deaths inside the jails across all, whether they be natural or violent, is 28 to 29. But see, if we don't do our homework and if we don't ask the right questions, and he just tells the public, oh, well, it's an aging, frail population, and they don't go listen to the Civilian Oversight Commission, they don't go listen to the people that are watching, people will believe that, and he'll get away with it. So I think what really bothers me is the misinformation and the lack of transparency.
Ms. Perez, are you still there? Oh, okay. I think she might. But you could go ahead. I wanted to ask her something, but you could go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just end with this. When he says he's being transparent, and he created a dashboard, right? He says, "Oh, we're being very transparent. We created a dashboard. It's on LA." First of all, you don't even know where to find the dashboard. But second of all, the dashboard is statistics. It tells you how many complaints we had and how they were disposed. It tells you how many uses of force, but it's not being transparent with the Civilian Oversight Commission and giving up the details of that investigation. I think that's what people want. So I think there's a lot of misleading information out there. I really just don't think he's done a good job being a part of the department. I know the impact that his failed leadership has had on the inside, and I know the failed, being a member of the community. I know the failed leadership on how it's impacting the community as well.
What I wanted to ask if Miss Perez, because we shared that image and a lot of people were pretty shocked and may not have known what had happened to your son, right? Would you mind, if you don't mind, sharing what happened, and if candidate Strong here could maybe explain what could have happened if he was chief at the time this occurred, and if anything potentially could have happened different, even if this absolutely insane situation had occurred anyway, if you don't mind.
Yeah, my son suffers with mental health. My son was 22 at the time of this happening. He was about 2 blocks away from my home, and he was incarcerated for 24 hours at Industry Station, and he had a mental health crisis. And when I called him, I told him, I can meet you at the hospital. I can pick him up. My son is in a mental health crisis. He just got out of the hospital. He needs to go back into the hospital. And they said, no, he was going to stay where he was at. Releasing him the following 24 hours in the evening. He was about 2 blocks away from my house. They seen him walking towards my house. So I immediately went searching for him. And there were several deputies flying back and forth with their lights off. When the helicopter came down, it was obviously really close to me. I followed the light, and I got to about 30 deputies, cop cars, two fire department trucks, two ambulances, um, and deputies putting another deputy on a gurney. I didn't know it was a deputy at the time because he had his shirt, the uniform shirt taken off. I was told it was a bad fight and I couldn't get any closer. Nobody confirmed to me that it was my son. I just was sticking around because I didn't know what was happening. And you don't want to think that it's your kid when you're there. You don't want to believe that. Um, I stood there and I told them about 3 times, who my son was, and they wouldn't confirm. They just said, no, 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 stand back. And about 40 minutes later, my son regained consciousness and was screaming. Um, he was screaming, "Why did you do this to me?" And then he'd go back down. Um, Turned out that 7 deputies had beat him. According to the police report, they beat him over 100 times. I want to say about 15 to 25 times each officer claimed. I think the one with the minimal punches was Paul Sedana with 14 punches. They all claimed they nothing but head punches, strikes, and to the groin. One deputy that was about 6 foot, 220 pounds. He says that he used his right chin to cover Joseph's right and left thigh. My son was 110 pounds. He's about 5'3". Um, I believe this is a deputy gang initiation. I believe this is way over excessive force. My son ended up with large lacerations, about 5 large lacerations across his head. His earlobes were detached. He ended up with about 19 staples to his head, and under the orders of the sheriffs was no anesthesia. 17 stitches to his face and his ears, multiple skin adhesive to parts of his scalp. These are just surface injuries. He was taken to Industry Station within 4 hours of the beating. I could only believe that he was taken to the Industry Station because if you die in transport, it's not accounted for. Um, After that, they put him in high power. They put him in high power for about 10 months. I believe this was to have less contact with me, and that's once a phone call, a phone call once a week. And I believe this was to either let him die in a cell or maybe just to heal. Either or. Yeah, 7 deputies that that Paul Saldana officer, the 7th officer, ended up being a school resource officer about 2 years after the beating at my daughter's high school. Um, and that just goes to show the lack um, of transparency this department really does have, because when there's a beating such as Joseph, when you look at Joseph's picture here, that look to me, it's the look before death. When you put a deputy on a school campus with that look, with that face, with that beating, how does that get, how does that pass? How does no one see nothing wrong with that? Um, that's what happened to Joseph. Joseph suffers from seizures now. His front teeth are broken from a seizure, a 2-minute seizure he's had since the beating. These are just surface injuries, that I can explain to you now. And that's what happened. Industry Indians is the gang that beat Joseph. Those same deputies that 4 of those 7 deputies that beat Joseph were actually involved in the Montclair beating. The bowling alley incident, or the beating, and that's what happened.
I want to say something. First of all, Ms. Press, thank you for sharing that story. And again, it doesn't mean anything to you to give you, but on behalf of myself, because this bothers me. As a person that's done this 32 years, this bothers me. As a person that worked in one of the most challenging eras in a very, very busy, I dare say violent city and era, this is completely, from what I can see from all of this, it's unnecessary. As a person that worked internal affairs and would have a problem with, listen, if I need, how do I say this? Punches do not gain control. If I need to gain control of somebody, and let's just say for their own safety, in other words, to put handcuffs on them, punches do not gain control. They're trying to do punches and kicks and hits to try to gain compliance. That does not work. We already know that does not work. And it's very hard for me as somebody that, and I don't say this as a pat on the back. I don't say this as in any position of pride, or look at me as a person who has fought with people to put handcuffs on them. I know that punches are not what gets handcuffed. It's control. And how do you get with 7 people? How do you gain control? It is not a bunch of punches, kicks, and see, and this is the training episode. This is the training that needs to change. This is where our use of force policies and our use of force processes and tactics need to change. And one of the biggest problems that we have is that it has been supported that deputies use force when they can, not when they need to. And I hope what I'm saying is resonating with the difference. There's a big difference on when it's absolutely necessary or when you can. When you can could still be found in policy. When it's absolutely necessary is a much higher standard. When there's no other choice is a much higher standard. And these are the kind of things that we need to move towards as we're in non. A lot of people call for de-escalation. I want to talk about non-escalation. I think that's a huge topic that needs to be addressed within law enforcement. And I'm just sorry that your family has to go through this.
What would you have done different if you were the sheriff at that time?
If I was the sheriff at that time, well, first, so let me just say this. First of all, one of the first things I do as sheriff is I go in and we talk about what is the thing that costs the department the most amount of money, that costs the community the most amount of harm, right? It's force incidents. It's force incidents. It's whether that be uses of force or whether that be shootings. We have to change the way that our force policies are trained and the way that they are taught. Again, I have seen multiple times and investigated where people are punched and kicked and kneed multiple times. That does not work. So one of the very first things that I do as sheriff, and when I take office this time, and I'm going to speak it into the air, is we go in and we say this stops now. It really does, and and I hate to say it because if I say this, you're gonna nobody's gonna believe me, but it becomes that simple. To go in and set the expectation, and to say what can and what is allowed and what's not allowed, and then if you violate what's the not allowed part, we got to start holding accountability to it. I just want to say this. Let's just say there's a person out there that wants to cause harm, they want to break the law, whatever it is that you want to call it, and they require police intervention, law enforcement intervention. With 7 people, what is the goal to stop that person from creating harm to somebody else? And I will tell you what that is. If you don't, the goal is to put them in handcuffs. How do you put people in handcuffs? You control their arms. How do you control their arms? With body weight, with leverage. You might want to control their legs so they can't kick you. Control does not come from punches and kicks. So that's my point. I mean, the reality of it is we're taught how to control, right? But we're also they're taught how to use strikes. And sometimes I have been involved in uses of force. And when you're by yourself and you're fighting with somebody, sometimes a strike is appropriate. But when you got 7 deputies on one person, listen, I got 4 deputies to get each leg, one leg, and I still got 3 people left over. So it doesn't even make sense that all of this would have happened other than the fact that it's been allowed to happen. It's been okay. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying. The internal culture has made this okay. And the sergeants and the lieutenants and the captains sign off on this kind of stuff. They make it okay. And to put your point, talking to Luna, he sounds very, he's very nice. And that's where a lot of people are being fooled. Like I said, when you're coming from somebody like Villanueva that's just toxic and insulting, somebody nice seems like a breath of fresh air. But the question is, what's changed in the department? You know what I mean? It's 2 sides of the same coin, if you ask me. So I just say this, what would have happened if I was sheriff? First of all, that whole idea of punches and kicks and knees would have already been changed because I've investigated that. I've been a use of force instructor. I've taught people on how to gain control. I've taught people on how to use leverage and how to use personnel. When I was around in the early 90s, back then PCP was a big thing. And it was back in the early 90s, that we were learning that trying to fight with somebody with punches and kicks and a baton on PCP does not work. We learned what we called at the time the swarm technique. You just have to get on them and gain control of their limbs. And eventually, and I don't care if you got to use 5 or 6 pairs of handcuffs to start clicking them together. You know what I mean? That's how you control a person. It's not punches and kicks. So again, I hope I'm answering your question, but the point is that right away, you got to set a new standard, and right away, you got to set a new expectation. And so, if I was sheriff and that incident had happened, the message would have already been out that this is not how we do things anymore. So there would have been a much higher level of accountability for something like that.
Are you willing to hold other deputies accountable if this was to happen again to somebody else, and God forbid it happened to anyone? Are you willing to terminate and prosecute?
Absolutely. Yes. Again.
Well, he can't prosecute, but he can investigate, and he can put out a loud, angry, message that says this is unacceptable. We're not going to defend it, right? A lot of chiefs, a lot of captains, we find them defending these actions. We find them going on the news saying this is why we did it. Look, this guy's a criminal. And I'm not saying I won't know what candidate Strong will do if elected chief here, but that would be the essence or the goal. I know you had a hard out here at 6:30. I certainly appreciate your time, Ms. Perez. I want to say thank you so much for sharing. I'm just so sorry to hear what you and your son and your family has gone through, and we'll continue trying to raise awareness to your what's going on. So thank you for that. And if candidate Strong, if you have any kind of last message, anything you want to share or say, and just want to thank you for your time here and answering questions.
Yeah. First of all, I want to tell Ms. Perez, thank you, because she is heavily involved, and she is being a voice for people that are out there. I see her and I see you. And please keep doing what you're doing. But to your point is like, you're right. And I misheard the question because she did say prosecute. We cannot prosecute, but here's what we can do. People don't realize this. It's not breaking the law that causes a deputy to lose their job. It's violating the policy. We fire deputies because of policy violations. And that's what we have to start standing by, right? We don't have to wait to see if the DA is going to file charges on it, because all we've been really doing over the time is if the DA doesn't file charges, then okay, we're good. We didn't file anything. Okay, so now we can handle this kind of how we want. And as soon as the DA doesn't file charges, then we start figuring out ways. In other words, if it's out of policy, it's out of policy. We don't need to wait for the DA. But to your point, thank you for the opportunity to answer some questions. I think maybe some other questions that I do remember seeing throughout the day may have come in. I'd love to get those answered. If we didn't get to them, I can do them, either send them in to you, or if we did get to them, great. But if not, I'd love to be able to give a response to those. I can create a video to them because I do think all of the questions are important. I will
That's
say
awesome.
this. Yeah, I will say this. I will get to them. Thank you for the opportunity. Please know that I am sincere and I'm genuine in creating change. My family has been impacted by law enforcement. I personally have been impacted by law enforcement, but I also know that those deputy gangs and law enforcement, they're also ostracizing a large part of the department. And there's a lot of good people that need to feel safe stepping up. And I think we're seeing that in the news now. Some deputies that are actually getting settlements because if they reported deputy gangs, they're becoming whistleblowers. Just take a look at my website. I know the QR code is up there. Get involved. Please go vote. If you don't vote, you're just going to get who you get. And I will say, please don't think your vote does not count, especially in these local elections, because a candidate in any race can win by literally one vote. This is not the national electoral system. This is a one vote counts. If you don't vote, you're just going to get who you're going to get. And I ask for your support. Please look at my website, and I'm here. If we want to do this again sometime soon, when we have some more time, let's do that as well.
We'll check out the response. We'll see the questions. We'll stay in touch. Thank you for the time. That is the barcode to get to his website. Drop your Instagram. And I want to say we've had over 70 people, and it actually just keeps going up and up, of people who've scanned this barcode and gone to your website since we've been speaking. And I think what you've said has resonated. Well, your Instagram one more time, and we'll call it.
Strong for Sheriff. Strong, the number 4 Sheriff, is Instagram, Facebook, and my website.
Appreciate you. Have a nice one.
All right. Thanks. You too. Appreciate you.
Well, that will do. I thank everyone for tuning in. This was really awesome. Candidate Strong is, man, I have to say, out of anybody in this position, running for this, I felt aligned, for that what is being said resonates. And I'm thankful for his time. I'm thankful for him answering questions. If you continue to have more questions for him, we will keep talking to him. The point is to raise awareness. I encourage everyone to vote. We got the I voted sticker. Voting is important. And other than that, we will be broadcasting this stream on all places that you hear podcasts: Amazon, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, all of the places where you stream a podcast. You will be able to hear this. Scan the barcode to support or check out Eric Strong, candidate for LA Sheriff. Thank you, everyone, tuning in. Have a nice one.